In this video, we're going to be talking about the most and least difficult Saturn placements. And for this, I'm mostly thinking of natal placements, but I believe, you could, of course, apply this to transits as well, what the Saturn transits are too. And I think, this is an interesting one. We've already done hardest ascendants, hardest Mercury, Venus, Sun, Moon, Mars. I'm skipping Jupiter because I am not an astrological encyclopedia. I wouldn't honestly know how to rank the most difficult or easiest Jupiter placements. So we're going to skip all that and go to Saturn. So I do think this is an interesting one because Saturn for everyone is difficult. Saturn for all of us represents something that we have struggled with, especially early on in life. And that's something interesting about astrology too, that it really shows you that we are all mortal. We all struggle with this or that. Even the person that is, the biggest celebrity that is so cool, is so sexy, they're so talented, even they struggle with this or that area. They may struggle with personal relationships. They may struggle with their home life, etc. And so that's where Saturn comes into play. This is what Saturn is all about. If you tell me, hey, I want a reading where you focus on my challenges in life, the first thing I'm going to look at is your Saturn placement, of course. Okay, so most of you know that already. Okay, and then one thing I wanted to address before we get into this is because Saturn has to do with such, challenging issues, definitely take this whole video lightly, take it with a grain of salt. I'm not intending on making light of some very serious issues. Of course, for all of us, wherever Saturn is in our charts, it's something that we struggle with, and we may be rightfully sensitive about that topic because it's such a struggle to us. And so I don't want to make light of anyone's struggle by comparing and contrasting different Saturn placements, comparing and contrasting different struggles. These struggles are real. Each experience is valid, and I'm not meaning to make light of anyone's hardship by any means. So just know that too. And of course there are other things to take into account. Even if you have Saturn in a relatively easy placement, depending on the configuration and the way things are set up in your chart, it could still be much more difficult than if Saturn is in a generally more difficult sign in someone else's chart. Does that make sense? So everyone's struggle is unique, everyone's experience is unique and different. So just don't be offended, okay? Okay, so let's get into the most difficult Saturn signs. You can see these signs are listed in the traditional order from Aries to Pisces. I enjoy doing this in alphabetical order though, because it's just a weird order. I don't know. So, and I'm going to be looking down at my notes because I've kind of arranged these. I've thought about this and I've arranged this. Oh, one last thing too is, yes, this will be subjective. This is my own point of view. I do base these things on observations. I base these things on astrological information as well. You can see that the positions of Saturn, whether Saturn is in detriment, where Saturn is exalted, things like that will definitely come into play for sure. So things, it's not entirely subjective, but it's not entirely objective either. This is going to be somewhere in the middle. This is going to be my professional astrological opinion. Okay, so most difficult Saturn signs. Let's start out with Aquarius. So Aquarius is an interesting one because Saturn's in a domicile in Aquarius. This is a place where Saturn is very strong. And generally speaking, places where Saturn is strong, I'm going to rank easier than places where Saturn is in detriment or, debilitated. And this is just because, this is how it goes for most planets. When planets are in domicile, their energies are accessed more readily. The planet behaves how we would expect it to behave. So with Saturn and Aquarius has to do with groups and, group community, things like that. And so if you have Saturn and Aquarius natally, this means that you likely struggle with knowing where you fit in. You don't know how to fit in. You may be very uncomfortable with group situations. You may be either afraid or just, not like group situations. And, at the face of it, these aren't things that are entirely crippling necessarily. You can still get by in life and avoid groups if you want to. You don't necessarily have to evolve in that direction, and that's totally valid. You don't necessarily have to overcome the challenges that you're dealt with. It is completely your choice. You have free will. You can choose whether to overcome these things or not. So fear of groups, not liking group settings, you have the choice, which is very Aquarian, to be a rebel, to, not associate with groups at all. If you do want to evolve, which most of us do, especially those who are watching this, who are interested in astrology, it can be very difficult to know how to associate with other people, but again, these things are all going to be different. It's about relativity. And I think, overall, Saturn and Aquarius, it's going to be one of the least difficult. I wouldn't put it at the very least difficult, because Saturn and Aquarius will inhibit your ability to interact with the whole world. So that could be really disenfranchising in a lot of ways. But again, you can still kind of get by without it in a way. Hopefully that makes sense. Next is Aries. So this is going to be much different. Aries is the first sign, of course. Saturn and Aries is in, it's debilitated. It's in fall. So when a planet is in fall, this is generally the most difficult place to have that planet. And this is no exception. Excuse me one sec. This is no exception. So what does Aries represent? Aries represents the self. It's how you feel about yourself as a person. It's your self-image. It's your self-expression. It's your self-confidence. And to have Saturn there constricting such a private, such a integral essence to your being, that is extremely difficult. I've known many people who have had this placement, and it, especially early in life, it can be very difficult. They have such high standards for themselves, so this can result in really deep depression and, just feeling unworthy. It can result in a lot of self-sabotage. So very difficult. I do think this is potentially even more rewarding later in life. Once you get over those initial challenges, that's how Saturn typically works. The more difficult it is early on, the more rewarding generally it's going to be later in life. So that definitely applies here, but still, this is a huge, burden to deal with. Many people will struggle with this their entire lives. But again, for those that do rise up to their own high standards, they have that potential to become that much better, that much greater later in life too. Okay, next is Cancer. So this is going to be similar as well. Saturn is in detriment in Cancer. Saturn, like we talked about, it constricts things. It makes things more challenging. It also delays things, which is going to be a key factor as well in some of these other signs. So putting Saturn in these signs that deal with issues that are very, private, very emotional, it's much difficult. I think because Saturn is so difficult in nature, and it pushes us to become, strict and mature, I think it's more comfortable to have Saturn in signs which deal with more public issues or more outer issues rather than such close, intimate, familiar issues. Does that make sense? So because Cancer deals with home and family and emotions, this is a very uncomfortable sign to put Saturn in. This is, like Cancer for us represents the area that we want to be safe. We want to be emotionally vulnerable and, be safe, that you can be those things in your home, ideally, or with your family, again, ideally. But again, with Saturn in Cancer, for those born with that placement natally, they will not have a home. They will not have a family. They will not have a place where they can be emotionally vulnerable and safe. And, this is, again, all these placements are difficult, but Saturn and Cancer it's going to be especially difficult, pretty much right on par with Saturn and Aries, both very difficult. These are huge tasks to, huge hurdles to jump through in life. But I don't want to say hurdle, I don't want to make it sound arbitrary, because again, these things have value to them. These challenges have value. With Saturn and Cancer, you have the potential to be a leader with your own home and family. You have the burden of having to create these things for yourself, but also with that burden comes that potential of creating something really beautiful. Okay, next is Capricorn. So again, it's kind of funny, all these beginning signs, Saturn is either exalted or not exalted, but either in domicile or detriment or in fall. So Capricorn, again, now Saturn is in domicile again. So this means Saturn is very comfortable in Capricorn. It's at home there. This is, Capricorn probably more than any other sign, deals with themes integral to what Saturn is. So Saturn is constricting. It's strict. It makes us focused on the long term. It makes us very mature. And Capricorn is a sign which naturally it's synonymous. It deals with all those things as well. Capricorn is mature. It's, thinking about the long term. It's constantly planning, so it makes sense that Saturn rules over Capricorn. If you're born with Saturn in Capricorn, this means you're going to be mature in the areas one would be expected to be mature in. You're going to be mature when it comes to your long-term planning and how you relate to the outer world. These things are all very natural. Yes, these things may be challenging. You may be very challenged when it comes to your long-term projects and goals, things like that. But again, what other area would you be expected to be challenged in, right? So again, not to make light of anyone's challenges, this can definitely be a huge struggle, but what other area would you rather have your struggle in, though? That's what this is about. So I'm going to put Saturn and Capricorn in the least difficult category. We semi-recently had Saturn transiting through Capricorn, and this was a transit that I was excited for because with a strong natural Saturn, yes, it can be heavy, it can be daunting, but it can also give you justice. It means that, justice and structure, it's coming in ways that are expected. It's coming in ways that are normal. So, it can bring justice, among other things. Next is Gemini. So this is a little bit different. Saturn is neither in domicile nor detriment in Gemini. It's not debilitated. It's somewhat neutral. You will find me, though, rank Saturn in the air signs as less difficult because air signs are detached. So if you have Saturn in an air sign, it means that you are challenged to be mature. You have these delays in areas that aren't necessarily super, emotionally close to your being. And I think that is the more comfortable option. It's more difficult to have Saturn in very passionate signs like Aries or Cancer. It's going to be easier to have it in dispassionate signs like Capricorn, Aquarius, or Gemini. Gemini as a sign deals with communication. It deals with how we make friends. It deals with how we relate to our siblings, our neighbors, coworkers, acquaintances, these kind of little friendships. Gemini wants to have all these different little friendships and relationships. So having Saturn there, it's going to put a damper on those things, at least initially. You're going to find it very difficult to relate to other people, to make friends. You can be socially awkward. There's a lot of borderline millennial Gen Z kids out there or young adults out there who have Saturn in Gemini. So some of you may know what I'm talking about if you're watching this. I don't think I have a lot of people that age who watch these videos, but a lot of them are socially awkward. It can be difficult to know how to relate to other people. So is that difficult? Yes, that can be incredibly difficult, but is that really going to damper your life, and be such a burden, compared to Saturn and Aries or Cancer, where, it's not going to be as intimate. It's not going to be as private, these challenges aren't going to be as, close to your soul, I guess, is what I'm kind of picturing. Saturn and Gemini, it's going to be more a difficulty of knowing how to express yourself. So yes, that is difficult, but I'm still going to put it in the less difficult category because I think, for most people, these are going to be challenges that can be overcome. We are all awkward on some level, especially early in life, probably more so with Saturn and Gemini, but it's something that can be overcome. Saturn and Gemini It's a mutable sign, so I think there is some kind of growth or learning implied with Gemini, which does make things a bit easier, I think. Yes, Saturn and Gemini can make your learning more difficult early in life, but these things are subject to change, you know. Okay, next is Leo. So Leo, Leo as a sign deals with your pride. It's a lot like Aries in a way. It deals with your pride, your self-image, your confidence. And so, of course, having Saturn in Leo, it's going to be very difficult early on. Because, again, what do you have if you don't have pride, if you don't have confidence? What do you have? What are you going to do in life? Probably not much. And so I think, this is very difficult. Saturn being such a cold, harsh energy, putting it in such a, typically cheerful, warm sign like Leo, it can be very sad to have that, youthful, vigorous energy shut down in such a cold, harsh type of way. But again, like I said with Aries, like I say with all these, these things take time. Saturn in Leo is particularly difficult. It is in detriment, can make you an outsider, just like with Saturn in Aries or Cancer. These are outsider placements. These are weirdo placements, you could say. Others won't understand your challenges. Others won't relate to you. They won't always be so sympathetic. But there is that potential there. With Saturn and Leo, you have the task of creating your own pride, creating your own confidence. And yes, that is going to be super difficult. It may take many years. But once you do that, there's huge potential there for sure. Okay, so very bittersweet. I am going to put that in the most difficult category. And I don't rank these like beyond that. If I did, though, I would say Saturn and Aries would be the most difficult. I'm going to go with the, textbook answer. Saturn in fall in Aries, that would be what would be expected to be the most difficult Saturn placement. That I would go along with that too. But beyond that, it's hard for me to say, for example, would Saturn in Cancer or Leo be more difficult? I'd probably say Cancer, but, I don't generally rank these things beyond that. Okay, next is Libra. So very different. Saturn is exalted in Libra. Libra, I think this can actually help you understand Libra to a much better degree. Libra is not all sunshine and rainbows. It's not all about Venus. It's not all just love and beauty and, falling in love at the beginning of fall. Libra is about all of that, but the fact that Saturn is exalted there shows how objective Libra can be. Okay, but what does Libra have to do with? Libra has to do with relationships. Libra is the two lines that connect you, the bridge connecting self to other. So it has to do with relationships, especially romantic relationships, but also any type of partnership. So having Saturn there, it can definitely be a buzzkill, putting that delay, putting those challenges, putting that strictness, putting all that energy onto your relationships. Yes, that is going to be really difficult. You'll see everyone else your own age falling in love and having their first relationships in your teenage years. And if you have Saturn in Libra, you're probably going to be, well, I guess technically if everyone was your age, they'd also have Saturn in Libra. So they would also be having, slow to have relationships. But I think that can be difficult when you're young. You want to experience these things usually. You want to fall in love and things like that. It can be very fun, and you can feel like you're denied that fun, denied that pleasure with Saturn and Libra. However, I think it can be really lucrative, very beneficial to have this kind of slow, gradual, steady, mature approach to relationships. This will ensure that you cut out the BS, that you're not engaging in these, manipulative or fake relationships. With Saturn and Libra, you're going to be very selective, which I think is very advantageous, even initially advantageous, which is very rare for Saturn. Yes, there are those drawbacks that I talked about, but there's also these immediate benefits, which, again, with Saturn, you're going to be very lucky if you're having immediate benefits with your Saturn position. I don't want to glorify this. This can be very difficult, but Also Libra, it is detached. It's an air sign, so you're putting this, challenging energy with, it's in the realm of your social relationships and your thinking, the mental energy. But again, this is a more comfortable place to have these challenges, rather than putting it in a more sentimental, sensitive place. Let's put it somewhere detached where we can handle this kind of scrutiny. Okay. So yeah, overall, this is about as easy as it gets, honestly. The opposite sign, Aries, where Saturn was in fall, I said was probably the most difficult Saturn placement, if we can say these things, if we can rank these things. And I would probably go as far as to say that Saturn in Libra would be the easiest placement, because again, yes, it's a buzzkill, drawing out, slowing down, being mature with relationships, but where else would you want that energy again? I think it would be very handy to have to be skeptical of other people, to be scrutinous. Yes, it may take longer to find that right relationship, but wouldn't it be worth it though to wait for the right one rather than experiment with all this, nonsense relationships? I think most of us would say so. Okay, next is Pisces. So Pisces is interesting. It's an interesting one. Yes, Pisces is really emotional and sensitive, and so typically it would be difficult putting Saturn in such a sensitive, emotional sign. But Pisces can also be very detached, much more so than Cancer or Scorpio, in my opinion. Pisces has the ability to completely detach from everything. And so in that aspect, it may be, somewhat almost cozy to put Saturn in. Pisces as a sign deals with spirituality. It deals with escapism, so escaping through sleep, escaping through music, art, poetry, meditation, again, spirituality. So having Saturn there, of course, this is going to be difficult, but a lot of this has to do with our current society as well. What does our society value? And our society is very materialistic. It's not entirely spiritual. And so in this current world, in the Western world, you can get by without developing spiritually. It may actually be more lucrative for you to do so. It's not lucrative in the sense, if you're watching this, like most of us want something deeper, we want something meaningful, and of course you're not going to get that if you don't develop spiritually. But on the other hand, you can still have a lot of fun in today's world and, be very accepted, and it'll probably be actually easier for you if you don't develop spiritually. So Saturn and Pisces, I think just the state of the current world, of the current society not being so spiritual, I think this would make Saturn and Pisces much easier. If you are challenged in these areas, it may actually be an immediate advantage, which again, like I said with Libra, immediate advantages are very rare with Saturn. And yes, that may be kind of bittersweet, but it's still something. What I typically see with those who have Saturn and Pisces is that they struggle to get good rest. Many of them have sleep issues, they have insomnia, they have, whatever, they have other sleep issues. So that can definitely be a huge impairment for sure. But still, if Saturn challenges us, Saturn is a burden in many ways. But again, what area would you rather have those challenges than? Well, sleep is very important. I'm a person who values their sleep. But still, if you have Saturn challenging that part of your life, challenging the subconscious, at least it's not challenging the rest of your life. At least you can go through, your waking life without those challenges. Saturn's not challenging some other area like your, ego or your work or whatever. It's just challenging your sleep. So again, not to make light of things, this can be very difficult, but I would say Saturn and Pisces is actually one of the least difficult signs to have Saturn in. And part of this I can back up with astrology as well. Saturn is in joy in the 12th house, and I bridge that, signs do not equal houses, but when it comes to the joys, the planetary joys, I would relate that to the signs. So in other words, because Saturn is in joy in the 12th house, I would go as far as to say Saturn is in joy in Pisces, and the planetary joys are relatively easy placements. They're not necessarily in domicile, but they are easy, if that makes sense. So Saturn, this is technically not correct, but I would say Saturn is basically in joy in Pisces. This is an easy placement. This is about as easy as it's going to get. Okay, next would be Sagittarius, I think, and I apologize if this is not correctly in alphabetical order. I did my best here. I didn't look it up. I tried to do it off of memory, I guess. Okay, but Saturn and Sagittarius. So, Sagittarius does deal with philosophy and things like that, almost a little bit like Pisces, like we just talked about. But I think mostly in the context of Saturn, if you have Saturn in Sagittarius, you are going to be challenged when it comes to exploring other worlds, exploring other lifestyles. I feel like Saturn in Sagittarius would almost be like a racist placement in a way, and I'm not literally saying that there's a connection there with racism, but at least abstractly it's a little bit like that, because Saturn in Sagittarius will make you not want to bridge out. It'll make you not want to visit another country, explore a different way of looking at things, a different lifestyle, a different belief system, a different culture, different language, whatever it is. Saturn and Sagittarius, you're not really going to want to try anything dramatically different like that. You're not going to want to try the exotic food or whatever. So that can be definitely a buzzkill again. You're not going to adventure. You're going to feel much more safe in your comfort zone, not trying anything new. But this is the safe option. You can still experience a somewhat satisfying life without visiting another country or what have you, or trying something different. Things could be a bit bland, but you could still have a very, for example, a meaningful, successful career. You could still do that without taking any large risks, without trying something new. There's still many things you could do. So Saturn and Sagittarius, I'm going to put in the average category. I'm really leaning toward less difficult, honestly. If anything, I would say Sagittarius is a fire sign. It does deal with your spirit, your pride, your energy, your vitality, and so in that aspect, I would say Saturn in a fire sign is going to be more difficult than these other elements, especially air. But again, as far as fire signs go, Sagittarius is pretty detached. It's mutable. It's going to be an easier place to have Saturn, generally speaking. Okay, after Sagittarius is Scorpio. So, okay, analyzing Saturn in Scorpio is interesting because at face value, I would think this would be easy, because Scorpio's a lot like Capricorn. It seems like Saturn, of course, deals with challenges and being mature, being reliable, and Scorpio deals with a lot of those themes too. Scorpio, is under a lot of pressure. Usually, it's under a lot of pressure to adapt and to be capable, to be cunning. So to me, it just makes sense that Saturn would be very fitting in Scorpio. However, Scorpio is a very emotional sign. It is water, and so it deals with issues that are very intimate and very personal to us. And I think that's where you get the difficulty. Scorpio is the sign of sex, the sign of intimacy, the sign of, intimate relationships, not just sexual, but also, being emotionally vulnerable, a little bit like Cancer. But this isn't just having to do with family. It's having to do with more personal, romantic, or maybe friendship type relationships, and reaching really deep levels of intimacy, emotional vulnerability, things of that nature. Scorpio is also a sign that deals a lot with creativity. So having Saturn there is gonna challenge all those things for you especially early in life. So this is going to be very difficult. I would say this is one of the most difficult places to have Saturn. I'm not going to put it in the very difficult category. I'm going to put it in very difficult, not most difficult. I would do a quick shout out for many of you born in the mid 1980s, who at that time there was a triple conjunction of South Node, Saturn, and Pluto, and I think for a time maybe even Mars, all in Scorpio. And so if you were born with, multiple of these positions, all of these positions deal with hardship and karma, especially the first three, Saturn, Pluto, and South Node. All of these deal with, karma from other lifetimes, challenges in this lifetime. So I think especially having all of those there, which, like I said, many people who have Saturn and Scorpio do have multiple of these there synonymously. That is going to be especially difficult. Saturn is already an energy that takes so much time for us to deal with and work with and become better at. So if you add South Node or Pluto or other things there, it's going to take even longer. It may take us half our life, or maybe our whole life, or maybe multiple lifetimes just to evolve in this area. Okay, so that's not necessarily having to do with Saturn and Scorpio. I'm just saying that since it is relevant to, our time and many people who experience Saturn and Scorpio. But yeah, even Saturn in Scorpio on its own, this is particularly difficult, because again, you'll notice this pattern with all the signs at the bottom. They're all signs that are emotional and proud and, fiery, spirited. I was going to say spiritual, but I really mean like spirited, who have that like passion to them. Putting Saturn in these passionate signs, it's difficult, and I really feel like it's sad. It's easier to put Saturn in a detached sign, dealing with detached themes that are not so close to your heart or soul. Okay, after that will be Taurus, right? Yes, Taurus. Okay, so Taurus is not really detached necessarily, but it's not super like soulful and passionate either. It's just very practical. And Saturn, of course, wants us to be very practical. So, right off the bat, I think you have a match here. Saturn's not necessarily in domicile here, but it looks like a very comfortable place to put Saturn. On the other hand, though, Taurus deals with how we support ourselves. And so, I could see this either way, being very mature, putting a lot of pressure on ourselves to support ourselves, that makes sense. That would be a healthy place to feel that kind of pressure and responsibility. On the other hand, though, if this pressure is so great that it completely inhibits our ability to support ourselves, then this can be very difficult, because if you can't support yourself, then what can you do? Taurus is such an integral sign, at least in the themes that Taurus represents. So I kind of rambled there a bit, but overall I'm going to put Saturn and Taurus in the average category. Those people that I've known with Saturn in Taurus natally, it doesn't appear to have been something completely crippling. Yes, any of these will be difficult. I'm not saying it's not difficult, but compared to these other positions like Saturn and Aries or Cancer, this doesn't appear relatively difficult to me. So hopefully that doesn't upset anyone. I did describe how I could see it being very difficult, feeling like you can't support yourself, feeling like you can't stand on your own 2 feet. This could have maybe some codependent implications, which, once you open that whole rabbit hole, that can be very difficult. But still, overall, Saturn's going to challenge you. Saturn's going to make you feel a lot of pressure to be responsible. What better sign to put that in than Taurus? There may be easier signs, but overall, I would say this is going to be on the easier side for sure. Okay, and then very lastly, we have Virgo. So again, Virgo is going to be a little bit like Taurus. Virgo as a sign is going to deal with how we service others. It's also going to deal with the maintenance of life, mundane issues. So, our relationship with our money, our relationship with our health. Virgo is going to have a lot to do with our work, not necessarily our career. That would be more like Capricorn, but it's going to be our work. So, do you work at a job that you're not in love with just because it pays the bills? That's going to be, a Virgo type of thing. So having Saturn in Virgo, I could see this being very difficult, especially if it affects your health. If you're dealing with health issues that are taking a lot of time, I could see, for example, if you have Saturn in a very difficult configuration in some kind of conjunction or some kind of weird aspect, you may have some really significant health issues early in life as a child, and that could, of course, be very, very difficult. I can't even imagine. But on the other hand, again, if I think for most people with Saturn and Virgo, this will manifest as, feeling constricted, feeling pressured to be mature and responsible with your health, with your work. You may be very humble. And in these areas, this is going to be relatively easy. These are going to be areas that we would expect to have challenges or expect to have, that pressure to be mature, to be responsible, to be wise. So overall, I'll put Saturn and Virgo in the average category. So yeah, that's how I would rank Saturn in these placements. This one, for some reason, I feel like is so much more delicate than any of the other placements that I've ranked, any of the other planets or positions that I've ranked so far. So let me know what you think about this, if you agree with these rankings or if you see things in a different way. I would love to hear it. But yeah, thanks for watching. And if you are interested in getting a reading, definitely give me a donation, or if you want a reading. These things support the channel. These outlets are what allow me to post content like this. So, if you are willing or able to support me, I really do appreciate it. All my information is in the description. Okay, but thanks for watching, and I'll see you later.